Hello, class. Before us is the penny-farthing, and it is the tool you will be forced to use to learn. As you can see, for most of you, it will be extremely ill-fitting, dangerous, and slow. Also, if you don't fit this bicycle, then you will be labeled disabled, and attempts will be made to stretch you and deform you into the right shape. So, let me ask, who's excited to be at school? On this episode of the Mind Tree Exponential Podcast, we will be discussing a return to a more effective form of learning. The idea of mass standardized education is as obsolete as the penny-farthing bicycle, both of which were created over 150 years ago. The bicycle industry was never controlled by a bureaucracy beholden to standardized tests, which is why it developed into modern mountain bicycles, racing bicycles, and through the work of two bicycle tinkerers, into flight. Why were bicycle developers able to go from the penny-farthing to the Velo X3, while our mass public education system is still stuck in the 19th century? What force is this powerful? Today on the Mind Tree Exponential Podcast, differentiation. Teachers in differentiated classes use time flexibly, call upon a range of instructional strategies, and become partners with their students so that both what is learned and the learning environment are shaped to support the learner and learning. They do not force-fit learners into a standard mold. These teachers are students of their students. Carol Ann Tomlinson. The term differentiation is a fancy way of describing an active tolerance for differences. Tolerance of differences comes first, and then the active leveraging of those differences generates the differentiation force. Differentiation and the rightful pursuit of happiness. Yale professor Amy Chua suggests that tolerance was the engine that propelled the Dutch Republic for a brief half-century to global economic dominance in every economic sphere. As the United Kingdom and then the United States would in succeeding centuries, the tiny 17th century Dutch Republic used tolerance to first attract to their lands and then draw out the very best from persecuted outcasts. Hudson Institute scholar Walter Russell Mead likewise places tolerance as the first in his brilliant 5-point plan for world domination. Tolerance of differences generates tremendous creativity, which can then be refined into wealth through the process of creative destruction, which is what thankfully destroyed the penny-farthing and cleared the way for the growth of an entire bicycle industry. However, this creative destruction is also the force that makes acceptance of differences so difficult. The bureaucracy that controls mass education does not want to be destroyed creatively or otherwise, and, like all monsters, will fight to survive. And this Leviathan is vicious, capable, and always hungry. The force of bureaucracy is essentially the antithesis of the power of differentiation, which is why so many of our students are forced to sit at desks which are the educational equivalent of the penny-farthing, or, in my opinion, formed of personal experience, and an even more apt comparison, the rack. These are tenderizers the bureaucracy uses to make consumption of the masses more efficient. Using force to get conformity is much easier than learning to tolerate differences, especially from a management perspective. Much easier to treat children like cows than like the big cats, like cogs instead of human beings. Much easier to break individual students on a rack of conformity than to have the existing power structures broken by creative destruction. Much easier to force ideas into students' heads than risk letting them get the wrong ones in. Much easier to control peasants than nobles or kings. However, as Mead and Chua argue, and as we have experienced, tolerance is very much more powerful than conformity. The difference between power and force can be seen in the differences between mass education and 21st century learning. Working with children is probably one of the best ways to see the futility of expecting humans to conform to flawed expectations. Young children have yet to be deformed by the force of mass education, and are wise like the uncarved block of wood, and will poke holes in arbitrary demands. I learned to tolerate differences in learning needs sitting at the table with my daughter as she worked on her math homework, watching her helplessly drift away from the subject she was supposed to be focusing on. As I researched attention deficits, I did so skeptically, because I came to learn that one of the ironies of attention disorders is that they are often exacerbated by demands to focus. The harder a student focuses, the more they drift. Like stress tightening the breath, which decreases oxygen intake and supply, which causes difficulties thinking, which causes stress, in a downward spiraling loop. I could see the current expectations which I was expected to impose were hopelessly flawed from my daughter's unique brain, and the unique brains of most children. I also learned from my observations that when she did start to drift, almost every time a goofy smile would creep across her face as she went to play in her imagination. Instead of being the prison guard in charge of trying to stop this behavior, interrupting her unique happiness so that she could learn to disdain me, I embraced the idea of differentiation. I would instead practice tolerance because maybe, just maybe, it wasn't actually a disability defined as such by the mass education system seeking mass conformity, but a unique, untapped, and long under-leveraged human ability endowed to our daughter by her creator very specifically, it seemed to us, as equipment to be used in her rightful pursuit of happiness. A better way to think about students. School as a garden growing brains. Rather than considering students as cogs to be used in the factory machine, requiring pounding into shape to meet the exact specifications demanded of a standardized test factory, a more effective and more human way to view students is through the lens of differentiation, which reveals that each student presenting a unique physical shape is actually just the housing, the shell for a soft, living human brain that grows as a plant in a garden. Each plant is unique and comes with its very own unique set of needs for growth and for life, and the educator must become a master gardener if they are to succeed. Welcome to our Mind Tree Exponential Micro School. Here, your unique brains will be given precisely the resources they need to grow and produce. We will use 21st century technology and knowledge about human learning to leverage your unique interests, aptitudes, and motivations. At all times, your physical and mental well-being will be the most important goal that drives all the work we do. Now let me ask, who is excited to be here? The challenge then becomes one of providing the special environments each plant needs to generate the optimal, most sustainable, and healthy levels of growth, or yields upon harvest. If we owned and operated an fMRI machine, as we would like to, maybe then we could find a way to measure myelin accumulation and have some tangible, weighable evidence of growth. Until such tech is readily available in our smartphones, however, there are several important indications which suggest health in a plant that are likewise comparable to those of a growing brain. Like the plant, if the life force is missing some important element, say hydration, the structure containing the brain will droop. Hydration could mean anything you want it to mean in the learning environment. In another blog, I discussed the library as a fountainhead, and that seems to fit the school as a garden analogy well. For growth, differentiated assessment is necessary, as different plants provide widely varying yields and types of fruit. While we can measure the yearly tonnage produced by an apple tree, how do we measure the beauty of an orchid's bloom? As with the diversity shown by the branching out of bicycle mechanics, the variations of life-enriching fruit each student has the potential to produce is limitless, save for want of a sufficiently enriched and open learning environment, and lest we forget the support of a caring and careful gardener. Tolerance in action, providing differentiated support. Here is our garden. The soil. Enrichment is the soil. Differentiation starts with multiple types of content and depths of engagement. Books, audios, and movies are the dirt, and the gardener's job is to ensure it is deep enough for the roots. Up the scale of enrichment and engagement is the living and organic material within the soil. Healthier soils require getting students' hands dirty. In the enrichment model, this means hands-on activities, such as simulations and doing the real thing. Put the pencil in the student's hand and let them play in the dirt, because doing so enriches the depths of their skills through the development, however small, of myelin. Example: when student X learns about some concept, as the gardener, I provide as many forms of that concept as possible, allowing her needs to establish which is most valuable, but always ensuring there is a very rich collection of material and engagement opportunities to choose from. Ideally, student X will utilize each and every level on the ice cream cone of learning, which is a model of enrichment. As with castles, we used books, audios, movies, discussions. We used active engagement such as simulations, building a box art kingdom, and doing the real thing, building a fully incorporated small business. Whatever topic she engages through her own interests, I simply provide enrichment, and she absorbs as much as she needs to grow. The water. Flow of content as the river. Keeping the content flowing, say by presenting the movie, audiobook, and book versions of the same story, is a steady stream providing the self-evident comparison of a steady watering of a plant in a garden. However, depending on the student, the flow should be increased or lessened because the roots of motivation can be drowned by flooding. Example: A healthy brain, much like a tree, can consume impressive amounts of water. At this point in her homeschooling experience, Student X is capable of listening to vast numbers of audiobooks. Given the amount of time made available to her through the flexibility of learning in a homeschool environment and the convenience of listening to audio content using a smartphone, I am often faced with the problem of many Colorado farmers of being able to provide enough water. Strategies that help include tapping into Amazon.com, YouTube, and our local public library system. The latter of which I describe as the fountainhead of learning in a blog post on the topic of libraries. A parent helping their student leverage the resources of the public library is very much like a farmer digging irrigation channels. However, if you have an abundance of capital, then Amazon.com is the fountainhead of learning content. And if you don't mind watching commercials or possibly copyright infringed video uploads, then YouTube is the fountainhead. We, of course, access all these sources and any other we can reach with our expanding roots. The fertilizer. Miracle grow for the brain. Exercise is the ultimate fertilizer for the brain, literally providing the biochemical nutrients that stimulates growth in the brain. High quality and sufficient quantities of sleep are essential fertilizers as well. Finally, healthy nutrition is a fertilizer. I would compare these to eggshells, chicken droppings, and earthworms. Perhaps not in that order. Mindtree X has posted full blogs on each of these topics. For more information on fertilizers, just follow the links. The roots. Establishing deep motivation. Differentiation in this manner, tolerance of individual student interests and aptitudes can be thought of as the roots of the plant, and the level of motivation to engage in learning as growth of the roots. Early on, a student will need help and support from the gardener to supply water, for example, but if the motivational roots grow through use of the student's personal interests, they can tap into sources of water and no longer even require a gardener because they will be completely self-motivated to learn. Consider your own personal interests and the level of learning that you achieve in these areas without any external motivation, based purely on your own desire or intrinsic motivation to learn about something that interests and perhaps motivates you. Example. Student X arrived at homeschool on day 1 with an interest in castles. We leveraged this pre-existing root structure to first nurse her motivation to learn back to health and then to power growth in other parts of her learning brain. We studied and learned as much about castles in as many ways as we could. We got books, audios, movies, and discussions. We engaged in castle-based project activities, including the construction of a great box art kingdom, still building to this day, 6 years hence. Indeed, her roots have tapped into the internal fountain of intrinsic motivation, which is ever and overflowing. The winds, strengthening power of project-based learning. Projects are open-ended and allow for students to respond to the challenges of creation with their unique set of skills and characteristics. Projects also require steady and consistent effort, much like the winds that require consistent strength from the entire length of a tree, or the weight of a barbell generates the force to overcome which spurs muscle growth. Completing any sufficiently complex project is a highly challenging task, much like completing a marathon, with every mile approaching the finish line getting harder and harder. Finally, finishing and presenting a project requires a great deal of focused energy. Example: Student X began building a box art castle as a way of leveraging her interest in castles. To create the wins of a project, we signed up for her to present the creation at the Pikes Peak Library District's annual Maker Fair, which provided a finish line. Then quickly the project expanded, as chaos tends to do, and we had to make difficult choices about the box art kingdom in order to start pulling it all together in time. The pressure to finish grew like the spring winds, and only through a final burst of combined effort and some deft driving did we make it to the fair on time, after which we're able to fully enjoy the summer rains. The light. Learning how to learn. Enlightening students with the easily understood physics of learning, such as enrichment and the sweet spot, allows students to regulate their own exposure to ideas. Plants know how to expose their leaves to capture the optimal amount of sunlight. Indeed, a tiny acorn knows everything it needs to grow into a tree. As Professor Ashton Nichols explains on the subject of education, the transcendentalists spoke up for the amazing, inherent wisdom in children, and suggests that education was not one of stuffing information in, rather it was a matter of drawing out. The brain already knows how to learn and grow. Perhaps the greatest advantage of homeschooling is removing the brain from the ineffective and damaging standardized learning environment, which pulls at the blossoms to rush the tree's production of fruit with predictable outcomes. Example: as life returned to student X, she possessed the roots and the strength to build structures capable of capturing that endless source of all human capital, information. In the 21st century, there is nothing odd about saying information is light. However, as with the amount of light that hits the earth, there is far more than any plant could ever consume. Teaching students strategies on how to learn, such as using the ice cream cone of learning, instead of teaching them what to learn, such as the dates and names likely to be on the next standardized test, is providing them with the differentiated support they need to grow leaves. Imagine this as a trellis system. Student X is equipped with many such trellis systems, including knowledge about the operations of her own brain, and smaller supports such as frameworks like a 5-paragraph essay template. We also spend a lot of time learning how to use the computer to access learning content such as Khan Academy and the library's online catalog. She was also shown and supported in learning how to listen to audiobooks, both technically by using the app on the smartphone and cognitively by using the skills of literacy. The real pay dirt. Regenerative systems. While all the above analogies are very nice to think about, for the real best practices, I can only offer you a container of pay dirt, which, if you introduce into your garden, will bring it to life. Life begets life. The stronger you are, the stronger you can be. As Dr. John Rattay explains, one of the most exciting discoveries about cultivating a healthy body through exercise is that there is a lot of research that shows this also makes your brain a more efficient learning machine. Being healthy improves brain performance, which improves one's ability to maintain healthy practices. As I will explain in much greater detail in the blog on Montreal X's homestead, if you set up a system properly, it can capture tremendous amounts of energy, all begotten by the energy from the sun. So a tree captures sunlight and turns it into energy-dense nuts which fall and feed the animals, which return the consumed back to the soil with enrichments added, and this fertilizes the tree, which captures even more sunlight as it grows in an ever-increasing cycle of growth. In this way, and many others, the human brain is very much like a tree, and getting that tree to grow is all important. Thus, help the tree grow through research and trial and error, then leverage those activities that produce a positive growth response. Find out what generates growth, be it lots of reading, lots of exercise, lots of Nova videos, etc. In fact, anything that your tree consumes in large quantities should be a clue as to what differentiation strategy should be leveraged. Example: Student X struggles with traditional reading, exhibiting textbook symptoms of dyslexia and disengagement. Reading causes Student X to literally droop like a dehydrated sunflower. Audiobooks, on the other hand, fill Student X with life. She literally jumps up and walks around when listening to especially gripping parts of audiobook stories. Within weeks of applying high quantities of audiobooks to Student X, she went through a physical growth spurt, adding weight and height and density. We used a different approach, one that tolerated and leveraged her unique needs, abilities, and aptitudes, and it generated growth. Tolerance of differences increases efficiency. To begin, the differentiation process changes the work of the highly skilled educator from a wielder of the whip to a coach walking the sidelines, watching the student do most of the hard work and sweating. Secondly, as Walter Russell Mead explains, the development of a healthy, tolerant society makes you incredibly dynamic, gives you all kinds of new ideas, new ways of doing things, and the development of such human capital contributes to making such societies fabulously wealthy. Mead describes this force as it develops in the United Provinces of the 1600s. By opening their society to new ideas, the Dutch were able to develop bold and creative new ways of more efficiently and effectively accessing and allocating the scarce capital of their relatively few people. By introducing the joint stock company and insurance for sailing ships, this dynamism generated vast amounts of wealth, which can be seen in the paintings of the Golden Age Dutch masters such as Vermeer and Rembrandt. The new ideas generate tremendous wealth that can be further invested in the practice of tolerance, which is not without costs, but which provides great returns on investment. Human capital weighed in the form of myelin would surely be among the most expensive materials ever produced, far more valuable than gold. How much would Johannes Vermeer's The Milkmaid cost on a per-ounce basis? If we go back to our bicycle analogy, we get a good idea of what differentiation means for students. Instead of being expected to fit the one right bicycle, students are free to make any adjustments they need in order to reach and push the pedals more effectively. This is why there is such a diverse and healthy bicycle industry, even in an age of automobiles. The only true standard is that every student is different and will need a slightly different adjustment to their learning machine. This is great because as long as the machine is adjustable, we can, through trial and error and communication, tinker with and refine the machine until it is perfectly and uniquely designed for that student. If we are out on the road riding our sleek 21st century machines, it would make absolutely no sense for the teacher to tell each student which gear they should be using, or whether or not they should stand up and pedal. Sure, the teacher could lead, but efficiency will be improved if the students could decide what gear they need to be using on their own. Each individual student has access to more accurate information as to the levels of glucose, oxygen, enthusiasm, etc. available for power generation. The teacher's role is to show and educate the riders on the way they can personalize their machine. Maybe they need to adjust the seat or the handlebars. Some riders like the clip-in shoes, others don't even know how to use them, but say no because they are unfamiliar with the benefits. These sorts of details seem insignificant to the layman, but to the professional they can quickly add up to greatly improved performance. A pedaling change may generate a 5% improvement. Add that to the added 3% improvement from greater foot-pounds generated by a raised seat, and the 8% increase gained by adjusting the handlebars to create a more aerodynamic riding position, and you've just increased performance by a significant amount. Instead of 10 students achieving perhaps 70% efficiency on the standard issue penny-farthing education, differentiated machines for each can achieve 100% and beyond. There is no perfectly average student, and no need to seek to stuff your child into such a mold, because we can all agree that, like snowflakes, each human being is infinitely unique and leaves a perfectly original set of fingerprints all over the work they put their hands to. Best to build them a machine they want to put their hands on, or their feet. Did you know that we have toe prints? And yes, they have been used in criminal cases. Conclusion. Some plants need lots of sun, others get burned. Some plants need lots of water, some less. Some plants like to grow to the sky, others enjoy making their way along the earth, while others even prefer to grow largest in the moist and enriched soil beneath the ground. Some plants grow very quickly in the beginning, and others start off slow and burst ahead, and still others are in no rush, no matter how much you want them to hurry up. What are you going to do? Pull on the blossom? See what that gets you. Some need hours of direct sunlight, some need full shade, and some need lots of water, while some need only sips. All students need very special education. Or, in the case of the Dendrophylax lendeni, the famous and elusive ghost orchid, an environment so unique that it drives humans to a new level of horticultural passion in order to help this frail little web of life bring all its pure beauty into this often decaying and dreary world.